Continuing on with our talk about the federal budget, which is one of Congress's biggest jobs. And we're looking here at 2.29, card 2.29, federal budget deficit versus the debt. That's a great question. If you could ask the typical American to explain what's the difference between the deficit and the debt, a pretty high percent would have no clue what you're talking about. Deficit versus debt. So you are going to know the difference. So let's go ahead and look at that real quick. All right, so a deficit. The deficit, that's the yearly amount the US government falls short of balancing its budget. The yearly amount the US government falls short of balancing its budget. So what does that mean? They take in $3 trillion in taxes, they spend $4 trillion, the deficit is $1 trillion. So okay, so like how much more did they spend than they take in? Now you may be asking yourself, like, wait a second, can't the government just spend what it takes in? Sure, it could, but politically, it's more beneficial to spend more, at least in more recent years. Historically, probably not so, because people would see that as irresponsible. But now, there's not a lot of pushback if the government spends a lot more than it takes in. It just borrows the money. Debt, the national debt, is the total amount the nation owes to other countries. The debt is the total amount that we owe to other countries. So deficit is a yearly thing. Debt, total. That's really the difference. Deficit, year, debt, total. All right. If you look at this chart here, this kind of shows you running all the way up to 2017, where right when President Trump took over from President Obama, and it shows you revenue. And that is in like the blue and the gray, and yellow is corporate taxes, and then green is excise tax, and green is some other type of tax. That's all the money the government took in. And then you have in red what the deficit or the surplus was. And you'll see that like most years, there's a massive little line of red there, and that is overspending. That's the deficit. If you add up all the red, then you get the debt. As you notice, in more recent years, we've been spending a lot more. And again, politically, it just hasn't hurt a president, whether it's President Obama, now President Trump, President Bush prior to both of them. It just hasn't hurt a president to just spend like crazy. Now, I say a president, and really I shouldn't say that because Congress passes the budget. That's what we're talking about here. But it hasn't hurt a president. It hasn't hurt Congress in order to spend a lot. In fact, you might argue that actually it helps them win re-election. Now, consequently, the rising national debt, in your own private life, if you spend too much money and if you borrow too much money, eventually you will crowd out the interest you pay, and all the payments you're paying on the debt will crowd out your ability to spend on other things that you want. Maybe your kid's college education, maybe your house. And then eventually people will also not let you borrow money anymore. Eventually that'll happen to us as a nation, where other countries will say, no, sorry. And then they only have two options: raise taxes really high, which is politically unpopular, or print money. And print money causes inflation. That's pretty much the only two things you got to do. Or cut spending big time. Just cut spending, which is not politically popular either. People want people want low taxes. This is where American people are. We want low taxes, but we want the government to spend a lot. So that's which don't really go together. Like you gotta fix one or the other. All right, so there's where we're at. You can see here, this is the budget deficit year to year. Budget deficit year to year. If it's red, it's a Republican president. If it's blue, it's a Democrat president. If it has like a shade of blue or red, that's the transitional year when one president leaves and another one comes in. You can see of all the years here going back from 1980. So we're going back 40 years anyway. The only years where the government had more money, spent less money than it took in, was in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And that was with a Democrat president, Bill Clinton, and a Republican Congress. That's it. So the Republican Congress was pretty conservative, and President Clinton was signed the budgets. And then the big deficits that you see on the right, that's during President Obama's term, and that was during the Great Recession of 2009 through 2011, or I guess however you want to date it. And there was massive government spending through that, and that was with a Democrat president and a Democrat Congress. But you look over to the far right, and you'll see the red start to go down again. That's Trump, and that is a Republican president with a Republican Congress. So this is bipartisan. Like both sides are spending massive amounts of money and adding to the national debt. Right now, in 2020 is going to be a gangbuster year for deficit spending because of the coronavirus and the ensuing near depression that we're having and the government massive spending. And you can see like the biggest year under President Obama. Let me go back. The biggest year under President Obama was 1.4 trillion in his first year of office of deficit spending. So 1.4 trillion more than the government took in. This year in 2020, we're looking at having a deficit so far of 2.7 trillion, like literally double what the worst year ever was prior. And it probably would be 3 trillion. I mean, it'll probably be maybe 4 trillion. I don't know. Is it ever possible to pay back the national debt? Okay, let's move on to the next topic. All right. By the way, there's the national debt. I don't have Trump laid on top of that, but it's going to be even sharper. But as you can see, if you go throughout American history, before President Bush became president in the year 2001, the entire national debt was just over 5 trillion. That went up to almost 10 trillion under Bush, and then went from 10 trillion to 20 trillion, almost 20 trillion under President Obama. So, like, again, really massively scaled up spending by the federal government. Again, this is spending the money that they don't have. They're borrowing this. All right. And then this is the national debt. But this didn't actually figure in the coronavirus crisis where we had to shut businesses down. And basically, the government had to pay these businesses for shutting them down. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that just kind of had to happen. And that's another $3 trillion, $4 trillion are going to be on top of that. So it's going to go up really quick. All right. So that's budget deficit versus debt. We've got two other things here that are related to budgets being passed, but they're kind of old terms. 2.30, logrolling. So, like, how do you get a budget passed? Well, there's this old thing called logrolling, and let's see what that is really quickly. It's when two legislators agree to trade votes for each other's benefits. So, like, hey, I'll vote for your bill if you vote for mine. And then in the budget, it was like, well, I'll vote for the budget if you put in money for my district. That's kind of the way it works. So that's the log rolling thing. Or, I'll vote for the budget if you then get my bill on the floor, Speaker of the House. And so those are the sort of trade-in deals, the deals that are worked out. So that way a bill will get votes. And that's called log rolling. All right. It's like the two of them working together on a log. You think of a log roll, one goes one way, one goes the other, and you try to keep it going. That they're working together to get it passed by helping each other. All right, that's log rolling. All right, pork barrel spending, last card here, 2.31, pork barrel legislation or pork barrel spending. Pork barrel legislation, you got the idea of pork, meaning a pig. And this is just the idea of stuffing a bunch of stuff in the bill. So that way the connotation is that the representative is bringing home the bacon. You ever heard that phrase like, bringing home the bacon? Well, that's what this is. A legislator is bringing home spending to their district, and that's bringing home the bacon, and we call that pork barrel legislation. They're also known as earmarks. To earmark something means to give it a specific purpose. In specific purpose is going to be like one person's district. Like pork barrel spending might be a new highway in a congressional congressperson's district, or a new post office in a congressperson's district. Like it can be very, very specific thing only for that one congressperson. And so it's federal funding to finance some sort of local project. Federal funding to finance some sort of local project. And Again, this is bringing home the bacon. You're going to bring money into the reps district. You might just put rep rather than representatives. I probably should have done that, but I didn't really think of it. So bringing home the money to a representative district. Why do this? Well, if you bring home the bacon, like the constituents are going to be happy, right? So this pleases the constituents. Remember, constituents are people in your district. And then if the constituents are happy, guess what happens next election? You're more likely to win. So this will boost a representative's chances of winning re-election. So earmarks, also known as pork barrel spending or pork barrel legislation, is funding local projects in a representative's district to please the constituents so that way they can win more. So the point of this is that there's incentive in the federal government to spend a lot of money because this maybe helps you win re-election. So there's the incentive to like spend more and more and more is part of that system. The only way to really stop the incentive of this would be something like a budget balanced amendment and a balanced budget amendment. And a balanced budget amendment is in a lot of states. A lot of states have a balanced budget amendment, but only a couple times has it actually been something that's been proposed at the federal level in an amendment, and it's failed when it's happened. If you poll the American people, it's very popular. Like high numbers of people, like 60 supermajority, and usually will be like, yeah, balanced budget amendment, that makes a lot of sense. But then Congress never passes it because like Congress, it benefits Congress to get reelected, so they ain't gonna pass it. So there you go. All right, there we go. That's it. Those are the first, that's the cards for this lesson. Go ahead and study those. You're gonna have some practices on them. Make sure you do it. Thanks.